So I'm delighted to invite onto the show this afternoon a gentleman who is an old Fleet Street colleague, but more than that, former national newspaper editor and media commentator, Mr. Neil Wallis. And Neil is with me now. Neil, a very good afternoon and welcome to Talk Radio.
Hello, Mike.
Hello, Neil. Thanks very much indeed for joining me. Well, Neil, I don't have to tell the audience that you are absolutely outraged by what you've been witnessing with this Extinction Rebellion mob overnight. You've already put out a few messages on social media, but it's fair to say that your outrage levels have reached a bit of a peak.
Well, my outrage levels generally about Extinction Rebellion are pretty high. But this is extinction democracy, isn't it? This is extinction free speech. The idea that these people think they have the right to tell me what I can and cannot read, the idea that these people believe they have the right to devastate people's jobs who bring these newspapers to you, the supreme arrogance of it, but most of all, the sheer destruction, Mike, the sheer destruction on the most precious thing we have, which is freedom. Yeah. And the idea that the police could stand by and essentially, so you and I both know in Merseyside where that plant is, and at 9:30 this morning, they still had not cleared it from last night. At Broxbourne, the trouble started at 10 o'clock. At 10:30, the police had still not managed to clear a few dozen protesters from the site to let out national newspapers to the people of this country. It's an outrage, Mike. It's an outrage by Extinction Democracy, and it's an outrage by the authorities that allowed this to happen.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. The first question I always ask when this sort of thing goes on is, who is going to compensate the businesses that have suffered? So, for instance, I didn't even get a Daily Telegraph this morning, OK? Some of the other papers arrived a bit late. Some of the papers arrived without the usual Saturday supplements in them. And if people think I'm getting too prissy about newspapers just because I've worked in them all my life, I'm not. The thing is, this was a complete and utter attempt to stop the delivery of the free press, as you've quite rightly said. Who's going to compensate the businesses that have lost out? Who should compensate them?
Well, what strikes me as, I thought it was actually an outrage last week when a guy called Piers Corbyn led a rally in Trafalgar Square against he's a conspiracy theorist against coronavirus. Now, I think what he says is nuts. I think what he says is dangerous, but they fined him £10,000. When are they going to find somebody from Extinction Rebellion for blocking the streets of London? Every major artery in London has been blocked this week by these people. When are they going to do something about preventing these people from blocking free speech? I'm talking to you from Cornwall at the moment. In my local shop has been devastated by this. There were no telegraphs, there were no Times, there was no Sun. The Sun, incidentally, which had a big piece by Attenborough today about this very issue. So they prevented that going out. And of course, it devastates these shops, as you quite rightly say, because people go in for their newspaper and they pick up a pint of milk, a loaf of bread, some bacon, whatever. It devastates business. Why do the authorities not stop this happening? And you're quite right. Who's going to compensate, whether it's the big multinational companies like the ones that you and I used to work for, or the little shop down here whose business has been devastated today?
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, the other thing is that the way the police are handling it, they've put out a release every evening after one of these ridiculous protests by Extinction Rebellion telling us, oh, don't worry, we arrested another 72 people today. What do you mean you've arrested another 72 people? How many of those do you think will turn up in court, will actually face the full force of the law and be told that you can't go around disrupting people's lives like this and crushing the democracy that this country has worked centuries to provide for us? The police don't seem to do anything other than just guide them into a van, drive them somewhere and then let them out the van. It's not really proper policing, is it?
No. And the other thing is, Mike, as well, that you and I both know that Extinction Rebellion is not a a sort of classic working class movement. They're all from Surrey. They're all,
a lot of them are, yeah.
They're all from the home counties.
Yeah.
They're all middle class, university, woke lefties who are all very pleased with themselves, and they all arrived by train, all very comfortably with their packed lunches.
Yeah.
And they, frankly, if you find them 50 quid, well, that's what they spend at Waitrose every other day. You know, I'm on Twitter a lot, as you know.
Yes.
And this is one of the subjects that you press the button and people react furiously, because these people are, you know, disrupting this country. And particularly they've chosen to disrupt it at a time when it's badly affected enough by coronavirus. It's impacting people's livelihoods. It's impacting people's wealth. It is devastating their chances of moving around. And now they've moved on to suppressing free speech. It just can't be allowed to happen. Why should I be able to tell you, Mike, that you must read the Financial Times tomorrow and then the Guardian every day? That's all you're allowed to read. You've got to read the Guardian every day. What?
Well, funny enough, these Extinction Rebellion people, they're not the brightest, and I think they tried to target papers which they would describe as right-wing, you know what I mean, and go to those particular plans. They don't realise that within our industry now, publishing contracts for the printing of papers goes across the board. There aren't as many printing plants as there used to be. So the Telegraph never got out this morning, but sadly the Guardian did. And the Guardian, of course, is the woke Bible for all these people. But we talk about this endlessly, Neil. You and I have discussed this before. Well, where will this all end? Because we've now got a Prime Minister who has hit out vehemently against the BBC when it came to the issue of Rule Britannia, and he was quite firm and precise about that. Silly nonsense. BBC shouldn't have done it. Fine, that got reversed. He's also, just before you came on air to talk to me, he's issued a statement through the news bulletin saying, you know, it's outrageous what's going on. Everybody seems to be outraged, but nobody seems to do anything about it. We've already said that the police make a very, very poor job of rounding these people up and doing anything with them. What is the answer? I mean, shouldn't we have some sort of civil disobedience law invoked to stop mass protests on the streets, which stop people going about their way of life? I saw a protest in the last round of demonstrations by Extinction Rebellion, which closed Blackfriars Bridge in London for 3 days. And for people outside of London, can I just say that London's divided north and south by a river, and the bridges are vital for the movement of everybody to get from one side to the other. Black cab drivers, white van man, people who want to go about their business. This can't be allowed to go on.
And during that protest, Mike, you will remember, on one side of Blackfriars Bridge, and particularly on Westminster Bridge, which they target, are big, important hospitals, and ambulances were being prevented getting to and from these hospitals. Sick people going for important appointments were being prevented from crossing. But these people don't care. They're in their woke obsession. And I, you know, it's a vital part of our democracy that people can protest, and so they should. But the idea that they can block and prevent people making their legal way around is wrong. I similarly believe that things that you and I have been involved in all our life, whether it's newspapers, whether it's television, whether it's radio, important radio stations like talkRADIO, they must be protected by law for the right to continue to broadcast and to get out to the public. Because as Boris Johnson rightly said, without us, nobody watches him properly. Nobody keeps the politicians on their toes. You silence the press, and next time it's you who gets silenced. The people that you agree with get silenced.
I totally agree with you, Neil. And just to add just very briefly to what you've said about the lack of movement and all that, often they will say, well, I'm sorry, but if White Van Man has suddenly lost business, that's just collateral damage for saving the planet. They are pathetic, honestly, because they just pick an argument out the air, pick a reason out the air, and then just get on with their silly demonstrating. Neil, I want to thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Thank you very much indeed for your time. That was Neil Wallis, an old Fleet Street buddy of mine, actually, from a few years back, but also former national newspaper editor and media commentator. And I have to say, every word that Neil spoke there should be digested, because what Neil's warning about is the true freedom that we have in this country. Freedom of movement, freedom of thought. If you're to be deprived the newspapers that are produced in this country and a free press, just think about that next time the Extinction Rebellion mob get out on the streets and decide they are going to dictate how you can run your life. You're not allowed to think for yourselves, okay?